So I'm just going to start by asking you to tell me what your experience was on October 7th.
So important to understand a little background, which is that I unfortunately lost my brother to terror 5 years ago. He was murdered by a 16-year-old Palestinian kid. And so unfortunately, I'm part of a club that I never asked to be part of, which is families that have lost loved ones in Israel. And while, terror is generally a pretty triggering thing for anyone, but it's a different level of triggering when it's someone who's already experienced it. And so, whenever there's a terrorist attack, ever, I'm horribly triggered. On October 7th, I was in synagogue. I didn't have my phone on me because we don't use phones on Chag, on holiday. And then, the siren went off in the middle of the prayers. We ran back to the bomb shelter and we went back, and it went off again, and we went back. So we knew something was going on, but we didn't think anything too, extreme.
You were in Jerusalem.
I was in Beit Shemesh, it's a town between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And then all the kids in the shul, and I say kids, I mean 18-year-old kids, started to get called up to the army. And then we knew something was very wrong. But I didn't have my phone, so I didn't know the extent of it. There were rumors. And then in a very eerie, kind of scary way, one of the symptoms of trauma is selective amnesia, or selective memory. So after my brother was murdered, I don't remember what I did the next day at all. And in a very weird way, I remember hearing the rumors about October 7th. I remember springing into action with my Israel advocacy, but I do not remember the moment that I found out. I literally do not remember the moment I turned on my phone and I found out. I completely blocked it out. It's wild. But that's trauma. And so, I didn't think much the next day. I just jumped into action. I shut down my tech business and I just jumped into Israel advocacy. And, because I was a tech guy before, I'm a tech guy still, but before I was focused on tech, my audience is highly diverse, or I would even say left-leaning, more liberal, because tech is a pretty liberal world. And so what I've done now is I've kind of capitalized or leveraged that audience who trusts me. For years they've been following, they trust me. Even though they, might be anti-Israel, they're listening to me. And so my posts, mainly on Twitter, but on other platforms as well, have surpassed 500 million impressions, which to me is the biggest sign that I need to be doing what I'm doing, because I'm a one-man show. I just hired someone yesterday for the first time. I never scaled my operation. It's just been me. And I'm getting messages from people by the thousands saying to me, you don't understand. I did not know that that's what Zionism was, and you just completely blew my mind. And, there are people that are a lost cause, for sure. People send me the most horrific messages on Twitter. There's definitely people that are a lost cause, but I believe that 90% of the people that might be anti-Israel, might be pro-Israel, might be indifferent to it, but they have integrity. They're willing to listen. And that's my target audience. That's what I've been doing just around the clock since October 7th.
So what is it that you're saying about Zionism that's reaching people?
So, people, first of all, fundamentally have to understand that truth is still a virtue. Don't tell me to stop using critical thinking. Let's look at facts. For better or for worse, Israel makes mistakes. We're not perfect, but let's look at facts. Don't tell me things that have zero accuracy in history books. Don't tell me things that have illogical, foundations to it. If A causes B and you remove A, then B should no longer be. So if occupation causes terror, then it should not have been terror before the occupation. But there was that terror before the establishment of the state of Israel. In 1929, Arabs massacred Jews in Hebron. Why? What were they massacring Jews for? For the future occupation? What were they doing it for? So, all of these things that people say and repeat over and over and over again, we're occupying Gaza. How could you say that? There's not one Jew in Gaza. Not one. So,
except hostages.
Right. We removed our dead. People don't know that. We dug up our dead when we left in 2005. So, first and foremost, if we want to have a discussion, we have to agree that truth is the foundation of any discussion. If you're not going to stick to the truth, then we can't have a conversation. And then when it comes to Zionism, I say, listen, Zion is a word. Zionism is just not a random couple of letters that people put together. Zion is a thing. What's Zion? It's Jerusalem, right? That's what Zion means. And so by saying that Zionism, is racist in some way, what you're saying is you're denying the Jewish people's connection to their indigenous homeland that they've always been connected with for thousands and thousands of years. And you're doing it based on just historical fabrications. So, I talk about, the fact that Jews prayed to Zion for thousands of years, 3 times a day. We long for Zion. I heard a story once that I really, really loved this story. A very big rabbi moved to Israel. And his student said to him, what do you miss most from America? And he looked at them and he said, the longing for Israel. Right? So, you can't tell me that after thousands of years of praying and crying for Israel, from the depths of Auschwitz, that I don't have a right to this land. So, we could debate. I have no problem with that, but don't ignore history. Don't make things up. So that's my message mostly.
What's the most common misconception do you think that people have?
Pre-October 7th or post-October 7th?
Let's do both.
Post-October 7th, it said we're committing genocide. Because that was given legitimacy by the International Court of Justice. So people think we're committing genocide. And, the people that believe that, oftentimes there's no talking to them. Because you can show them that the ratio between, innocent and civilian deaths is the lowest it's been in any war in decades, maybe centuries. And you could show what Israel does to avoid civilian casualties. And you could show that Israel's losing hundreds of its own soldiers, so in order not to put the Palestinians at risk. These are all facts. And so when a person says Israel's committing genocide, and I come at them with those facts, if they don't accept reality, then there's nothing to talk about. So that's post-October 7th. But I think pre-October 7th is that, we occupy them and they're oppressed and we oppress them, and, we're just 75 years of oppression. It's just like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? Apartheid? Really? How could you say that? Like, millions of Arabs live in Israel. Supreme Court justices, in the parliament, in every component and element of Israeli society with Arabs. Apartheid? So, on the one hand, it's our job to debunk the lies. On the other hand, we have to know that we have finite resources, and that if I'm spending time trying to convince someone on Twitter that, there's no occupation, and this is a person that sent me a Heil Hitler tweet 2 minutes ago, I'm wasting my time. Instead, I should be doing something that's more effective. But, there's the list of misconceptions about Israel is never ending. It's literally never ending. I've written tweets about this. Like, here are things that only can be said about Israel. It's just endless. It's a very, very clear, blatant double standard, which unfortunately is something that many Jewish influencers focus on their social media, how it's a double standard. I don't know that that's the best narrative. I don't think that's effective at all. If the world hates us, then telling them that they hate us doesn't make a difference. So focus on good and don't focus on double standard on the anti-Semitism. It's empty ears. But those are some misconceptions among a list of 100.
The claim of genocide predated October 7th.
Right.
So, it's I think there was something about October 7th that brought things to the surface that were just sort of lying underneath. What have you noticed since October 7th that you were surprised about?
The most fundamental thing was that on October 8th, I said to myself, if I could find some silver lining, because I'm an optimistic guy, I need to find some silver lining. If I'm going to find some silver lining, it's that at least now the world will stand with us. Like, there's no scenario in my wildest dreams in which the world denies October 7th. They live streamed it in HD video. How could you deny that? I literally believed, in my naive whatever, that at least now the world's going to stand with us. A week later, gone. So that still shocks me to my core. And it shocks me to my core how otherwise intelligent and otherwise moral people, truthfully, good people, smart people, are so blinded by the Jew hatred that they're just, for lack of a better term, they're just straight up idiots. And all the things they say make no sense. There's an investor in Silicon Valley. He's widely regarded as one of the top investors in the world. His name is Paul Graham. He's started Y Combinator, the biggest accelerator. He's a legend in the tech world. One of the smartest investors in the world. He is a blazing, flaming anti-Semite. The things he says on Twitter are they're lunacy. They're insane. And just on a very kind of granular level. And again, the list is long, but just on a granular level. Someone just asked me, what do you say to people who say that there are 25,000 dead civilians in Gaza? What do you say to people? So I say, first of all, where'd you get that information from? Tell me, what is the source of information? And, it might take a minute, it might take 2 minutes, but eventually we understand that the source of that information is actually a terrorist organization. You're quoting figures from a terrorist organization? So that's first and foremost. But you know what? Forget that. Let's just say that it's accurate. Well, let's think about these numbers. 25,000 people dead? Innocents, right? They're all innocent children, women, right? Great, I accept that number. Just tell me how many combatants or how many terrorists we've killed. 0? Oh, well, clearly that's inaccurate. So if Hamas says everyone's innocent and we killed 0 terrorists, then clearly those numbers are not, in any way credible. So, listen, I think at the end of the day, I go back and forth every day on social media, which is, on the one hand, am I just talking to empty ears? Is anybody even listening? But I know that that's not the case. I know that's not the truth. I know there are people listening because I get thousands of messages from people. And it's hard because when the world keeps repeating a lie over and over and over again, just lies and lies and lies. You're like, there's like an image on Facebook or on social media that people shared, which is a huge ocean of people, and then a person standing in front of them, and it says, the anti-Israel crowd, me. And you see them trying to push off the huge ocean of people. So, you're working against people at massive scale. And you've seen these videos, they go over to the protesters, what river, what sea? It's absurd. And that phenomenon exists in no other conflict in the world. If you're going to protest on the streets about something, you presumably know a little bit about that thing. Not here. So it's a crazy, crazy, twisted, backwards world. And it is not easy to maintain moral clarity when everyone around you is morally bankrupt. So it's our job to not let that into our soul, not let that seep in, because it's just pure immorality, And unfortunately, there are too many Jews that are anti-Israel, and it's crazy to see. Because, we know in history, when the Hitler of our generation, whoever that may be, is going to come after the Jews, they're not going to be spared. They could side with the Hitler of our generation all they want. They're not going to be spared. Just like the assimilated Jews in Germany weren't spared. So, their thought process of, I'm going to be just like them, just doesn't work. Look at history books,
There are a number of conspiracy theories about October 7th, some of them being propagated by Jews.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have the college campus problem in the U.S., where the people are being chosen for these committees who are Jewish, but who have written and espoused anti-Israel stuff.
We're always the worst.
Yeah.
We're always the worst. We're our worst enemy, always. Throughout the generations. Again, we have to understand, this isn't a new phenomenon. Do you know what percentage of the Jews left Egypt? God brought the 10 plagues on Egypt and brought the world's leading empire to its knees. He blatantly revealed himself. You'd think 100% of the Jews would leave. They saw God. 20% left. 80% stayed back.
That comes from the Mishnah?
Torah, no, it's Rashi. And the words are Vachamushim, Alu b'nei Yisrael meretz Mitzrayim. That 1/5 Vachamushim, 1/5 left. 80% stayed. How's that possible? How is that possible? What was their narrative? What were they telling themselves? I'll tell you what they were telling themselves. I'm Egyptian. I was born in Egypt. My parents were born in Egypt. My grandparents were. Don't tell me about some, fantasy of a land of milk and honey. Walking through the desert, leave me alone. I have a roof over my head and food on the table in Egypt, leave me alone. That's what they told themselves. And that's what Jews are telling themselves today.
Well, and I'm certainly no Torah scholar, but I do remember one part of the Exodus, which is when the Israelites complained, it was better in Egypt, at least we had meat.
Yeah, this is what we do. This is what we do. We don't see what's right in front of our faces. There are so many stories to show this. The 12 spies. We sent in 12 spies, right? God's like, go into the land. I've done everything for you. Go into the land. No, we didn't send spies. Okay? So 12 spies, 12 of the generations of the 12 of the leaders of the generation, 12 of the most important rabbis of the generation. 2 came back and said, yeah, it's a beautiful land. 10 came back and said bad things about Israel. How could that be? We know. We were punished for generations that they spoke badly about the land of Israel, which I learned my whole life. But I never stopped to think, what was their narrative? How could it be that 10 of the leaders of the generation spoke badly about Israel? How could that be? Where's the logic? And I never had an answer to that question. Until about a few months ago, when I was eating dinner at a friend's house who's a little bit more ultra-Orthodox than I am. And he's not anti-Zionist in any way, shape, or form, but he's a little more yeshivish, as we call it. And his wife, we were having dinner, and his wife looks at me, because I guess Zionism came up, or I don't know what, and his wife looks at me and says to me, what, you think all Jews belong in Israel? She asked me with a serious face, like, you think all Jews belong in Israel? I'm like, do you not read your prayers in the Siddur every morning where it says, V'Yerushalayim ircha b'rachamim tashuv, we're going to come back to your city of Jerusalem? We say it in your prayers every morning. You learn about it. Well, of course every Jew belongs in it. What kind of question is that? Now, does that mean every Jew needs to pick up and come right now? No. But what we should know as Jews, this is our home. And she says to me, yeah, but Israel's a secular country and my kids are very religious, and if I bring them here, they're going to become less religious, she says to me. And then it hit me. Something I learned my whole life. What was the narrative of those 10 people, those 10 rabbis? They're like, I'm in the desert right now. We have food from God, direct from God. right? We have clouds of glory around us. We have a direct line of communication with, we are religious. I'm not going to go into Israel and build an economy and build an army. Leave me alone. I'm religious. I'm going to stay here in the desert. Except God said to them, guys, that's not your job. Get into Israel. No, I'm going to stay religious. We're seeing the narrative again, same thing. God's get into Israel. No, I'm going to stay in the Borough Park. I'm going to stay in Lakewood. I'm going to stay religious. If I go to Israel, I'll be less religious. It's the same narrative. We repeat it over and over again, every generation. And our holidays, every holiday that we celebrate as Jews, it's the same story. Near genocide, they tried to annihilate us, and we won. But at the time, it was horrible tragedy. On Purim, it was a near genocide of the Jewish people. It was horrible. And if I had told you at the time of Purim that one day we're going to celebrate, you would have said you are the most insensitive. But here we are. And so we're in a war right now, and it's devastating, and it's hard to see. But I think it's our responsibility to take a step back, mourn our losses, cry, embrace the devastation. But take a step back and realize that we've been through this rodeo before, and we're going to dance again. That's it. We will, because we always do. It's horrible. We will always cry for the people we lost. We will always cry for the horrible tragedies we've endured. But we will dance again. We don't see it, though. We never see it. We need to see it. We need to take a step back, open our eyes, and see what's in front of our eyes. This entire war from beginning to end is supernatural. In a very real way. If I told you that 3,000 terrorists marched into a country smaller than New Jersey with 8.5 hours of free hand and unlimited access to automatic weapons, how many people do you expect them to kill? 50,000? 100,000? 200,000? Not 1,200. Not 1,200. Now, I would never, God forbid, say that the atrocities they committed are a miracle. That's a horrible thing to say. But had they not acted like animals, pardon my aggressive way of, describing them, but had they not done those atrocities, they would have taken over Israel. Israel would be wiped out from that. So again, I could never say that it was a miracle, but it could have been a lot worse. And forget that. You know what? One might say that's a pretty controversial statement to say it's a miracle. I mean, it's a horrible thing to say, right? So forget that. But let me ask you this. Try to, it's hard to step back when you're in it, but try to step back. Imagine there's no war and you're just looking at the reality. If I told you that 25,000, or whatever the number is, 1,000 rockets, that we know its abilities when it does land, what it does, devastation. 25,000, and again, I'm making up that number, it's probably a lot more. 25,000 rockets were fired into a country that's a speck on the map, right? Each rocket has the ability to kill, let's just go crazy, 20 people. You know what? 10 people. 25,000 rockets. They fell in empty spaces. Are you for real? What empty spaces? Where are there empty spaces in this country? This country is the most densely populated. There are no empty spaces. Where are these rockets falling? I don't know. It's unbelievable. So you could look at it and say, yeah, their GPS isn't great. Or you could say, listen, God's like, and even the Iron Dome. It's like, oh yeah, the Iron Dome and stuff. Sure, 95% precision of a device that knocks rockets out of the air. Like, that is a miracle. That is not a natural thing. That is the clouds of glory. Iron Dome, it's protecting us. This is what we did in the desert. That is what the Iron Dome is. The inventor of the Iron Dome, Daniel Gold, told me. He's like, he went to the government with this idea. They said it's impossible. So he went to the army. They said it's impossible. He went to the US government. Everyone told him it's impossible. And so he built it. These are miracles. But when we're in it, we don't see it. And that's, again, it's the story of our nation. We have to see it. We have to open our eyes. The world has clouded our morality. When you're in it, it seeps in. We need to stand our ground and maintain our moral clarity and look at things from an objective perspective and realize that we are a light unto the nations in a very real way, not in an abstract voodoo kind of way, in a very real way. And no matter how you could name any cancer research, Israel leads the way. Natural disasters, who's first on scene? Israel. You go on for hours. We are a light unto the nations. How many Nobel Prizes have Jews won, right? We need to own light. The world is a very dark place. Our narrative should be light. We own light in the world. And I heard something that deeply resonated with me in the beginning of the war. I heard it from a rabbi in Boca Raton, Florida. He said the following thing, and it's just, if you internalize this, it all makes sense, really. In the portion of Lech Lecha, where God comes to Abraham and says, leave where you grew up, and we're going to go to this strange land which we know is Canaan, Israel, right? So he says, He says 4 words that, again, as a person who learned in Jewish school my whole life, I knew these words. I read them a zillion times. Never thought about them. It says the following words. God says to Abraham, Va'avarcha mevarechecha. Those who bless you, Abraham, as in the Jewish people, will be blessed. Umekalelcha, which means those who curse you. Now, you don't have to be an English teacher to understand that grammatically, it says Va'avarcha mevarechecha. It's the same root of the word, bracha, blessing. Umekalelcha, the next word should be akalel, I will curse. Just grammatically, the structure, it should be parallel, but it doesn't say that. It says, Va'avarcha mevarechecha, those who bless you will be blessed. Umekalelcha, those who curse you, aor. That's what it says in the Torah. Now, aor is another way to say I'll curse, but why does it switch language? It's an obvious question. It's right in front of your face. Why does it switch? Why doesn't it maintain the parallel?
Or is light, right?
There you go. So, aor, which means to curse, also has the word light in it. And this is the right way to read that verse.
Will be in darkness.
Va'avarcha mevarechecha, those who stand in your corner, Jews, and help you in your dark times, they will be blessed. Umekalelcha, those who come at you, those who get in your way, they'll see your light.
Oh.
They'll see your unity. They'll see your charity. They'll see your support. They'll see your delegations. They'll see the unbelievable things that are happening in the Jewish nation today. They're bringing darkness, you're bringing light. Those who bless you will be blessed. Those who curse you will experience your light. To me, that sums it all up.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Really beautiful.
Yeah. It's just, it feels like the truth.
I don't speak any Hebrew, but I recently learned that when somebody says Boker Tov, your response is Boker Or.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really beautiful.
Yeah.
Morning light.
Yeah, it is beautiful.
Yeah.
I never thought about that. It's interesting. But it is a bigger, what you're saying is, it's really interesting you just said that, because we're living in this country, debating with the world, it's our country, it's not our country. Like, you walk outside, we're walking in the footsteps of King David, in a real way, not in a, like, down the block is the road that people walk pilgrimage to the temple. You can see the road, you see the footsteps. And like you say, the words Boker Tov, good morning, like these are words from a language that existed thousands of years ago. There's never been a language that was revived like the Israel, like Hebrew. Never existed. And so, on the one hand, yes, I'm not saying that you can dismiss, what the world believes because you live in the world, but how do you debate that when a person says this isn't your country and you're like, dude, this is my language, man. This is my great-grandfather walked here. Like, what are you even talking about? It's very frustrating. I gotta be honest. Like, I'm torn every day. It's like, should I even waste time? Like, these guys are just nuts. They're just nuts. They're not, there's no logic. There's no reason. There's no truth. They don't even view truth as a virtue anymore. Don't tell me I'm a man. I'm a cat. I spoke to someone the other day, true story, I promise. Not kidding. I spoke to someone the other day who told me that in his kid's college, they wanted to put a pro-Israel booth to give out material, and they said, no, it's too controversial. And in his kid's class, there's someone who identifies as a cat, and they need to refer to him as a cat. True story, I promise. Promise you it's a true story. Promise. Heard it firsthand. So yeah, we're living in a very backwards world. Where black is white, white is black. Terrorists are freedom fighters, and it's just... So we live in the world, so we need to shield ourselves from this just moral bankruptcy. There's no other way to describe it.
There are two narratives about Jews in Israel that are used to counter the Jewish claim to, number one, indigeneity. And so one is a counter to the indigeneity argument, and the other is just the counter to the legitimacy of the claim to the land. So the one narrative is the narrative that it's a lie, that Jews were never here, that the temple wasn't really a Jewish temple. This is the sort of thing that's taught in UNRWA schools to children, TV shows. We see the videos. If people look, they can find the videos of teaching children that what Jews are doing is digging tunnels underneath the Al-Aqsa Mosque in order to make it collapse, not in order to find, archaeological interesting artifacts of the Jewish connection to the land from thousands of years ago. And then the other narrative is, okay, yes, but that was thousands of years ago. It's meaningless now. What are your thoughts about those two?
So, like any argument, you need to know who you're talking to. you need to know your audience. I'm a marketing guy. You always have to know your audience, right? If your audience is willing to listen, we can talk. A lot of things we can talk about. But if they're coming at me and saying, Jews never existed in this land, is this a person you're going to get through to? If a person says that, and that's the level of dishonesty, is there really, because then it's just my word against, it's like, no, you weren't here. Yes, we were. No, we weren't. Like, we're not going to get anywhere. If you don't believe basic fundamentals of history and facts, wow, what can I possibly say to you?
Well, in that case, there are people, that isn't necessarily an inability to deal with facts or truth. It's an ignorance because of being taught things that are false. So if somebody is, genuinely interested in why you think there is a legitimate claim other than in the Bible.
Right. So, it's a pretty easy question to answer. 1948. That's it. You're quoting to me all day long about how the UN passed 14 resolutions against Israel in 2023 and the rest of the world only 7, right? Which is absurd. But you're quoting to me how we are occupiers and colonizers, right? Because the UN said so. Okay, so we're accepting the UN now? You accept the UN as an authority? Fine. The UN gave us a state in 1948. Leave me alone.
That works for both of those.
Yeah, and let's go even further. They gave the Arabs a state too. They had a state. You want a state? You had it. 1947, they gave them a partition plan. They gave them a state. That's it. They didn't take it. They attacked. And what happened next? We won. And they attacked again and we won. They attacked again and we won. What other country, does anybody say the Americans have to give America back? Forget thousands of years ago. Forget that. Let's just throw that out the window. 1948, we got a state. We were attacked multiple times. We won multiple times. We got land. We gave it away in many instances for peace. What do you want from me?
Including Gaza.
Yeah. So I'm saying, if you're going to tell me that I have to give this land back, then go tell America they have to give their land back. It's the hypocrisy. It's staggering. It's just do you not have any shame? Where do you live? I say to people online, they come out, I'm like, where do you live? And they say, I'm like, where'd you get that land from? It's like, stop it. Have a little integrity. But when it comes to Israel, when it comes to the Jews, there is no integrity. The hatred runs so deep that it blinds people, and the hatred just takes over. And again, unfortunately, I'm at the forefront of it. If you read any of the replies to my tweets, you wouldn't believe it. You know what someone did to me yesterday? Mm-hmm. I met someone 2 days ago. You ever hear of the Twitter account called Libs of TikTok?
Oh, Chaya. Yeah, Chaya.
So I met her 2 days ago for breakfast, and we took a nice picture. We were in the Sheraton Tel Aviv, and I took a picture in front of the beautiful beach. An anti-Semite on Twitter yesterday photoshopped us out of the beach background and put us in the background of Gaza, meaning rubble is behind us, destruction is behind us, and said, look at these Jews smiling in front of Gaza. The guy has 1 million followers. It went crazy, hundreds of thousands of shares, millions of views. And someone reported it to Twitter, and Twitter said, everyone understands that it's just parody. Look at the replies. No one believes it's parody. Left it. They declined my report. It's crazy. So I'm at the forefront of the crazies. Forefront. And it's very scary situations. People are legitimately, it's honestly, maybe this offends someone, but it reminds me very much of a dog with rabies. They're just foaming at the mouth. Jews, October 7th happened, boom! Our anti-Semitism can rise to the surface now. Before we had to be ashamed. But now, even before Israel attacked, right? Even before anything, somehow on October 7th, we were massacred and we're the oppressor? What? No logic, because they're foaming at the mouth. The hatred guides them, right? It's just, I don't see anything other than hatred, So, there are some people, unfortunately, I would love to engage every person. But there are some people, unfortunately, that you could say to them, beyond any shadow of a doubt, the sky is blue, and they just will not believe you. So what are you going to do about it?
One of the things that, one of the accusations, this sort of genocide, the general genocide issue, the overwhelming force, disproportionality, blah, blah, blah. In contrast to those claims, the army has taken great pains to, and has put their own people at risk to avoid civilian casualties. One of the things I remember, I'm not a very observant Jew, but one of the things I remember is the idea that when your enemy is killed, you're not supposed to celebrate.
So interesting.
Right?
I just wrote a post about this 2 days ago. I literally wrote a post about this 2 days ago because, and it's a broader phenomenon. I call it the as a Jew Jews. Because when a Jew is self-hating or anti-Semitic, he starts the sentence with "as a Jew." You ever see these people?
Yes.
As a Jew, we don't celebrate. And by the way, I hear what you're saying, and I'll address it in a second. But it's a deeper thing of Jews always siding with the enemy, always. And so when I post a thing on Facebook or wherever about us eliminating a Hamas leader, I get a ton of and there's always one Jew always comes in and says, "No, it's not our nature. It's not our nature." So I wrote a post about it, an extensive post. You can read it, and I went into the details of the of the issue. So what you're referring to is a commentary on the Torah that said that when the Egyptians were drowning and the Jews started to sing, God said, "These are my creatures, my creations, drowning. What are you singing about?" That's the common perception of that commentary, but it's inaccurate. And I'll tell you why it's inaccurate, because the people who quote that literally start in the middle of a sentence. They forget the first part of the sentence. The first part of the sentence is, Bikshu Malachei Asheres. The angels in heaven wanted to sing. And Hashem said to him, "What are you singing about? My creations are drowning and you're singing?" He didn't say that to the people, he said it to the angels. It's black on white. The people, we sang on the sea. Not only did we sing, and not only did God appreciate it, it's become part of our daily prayers in the morning. We sing that. It's called Az Yashir. It's a tefillah, it's a prayer. That was literally what they said on the sea. So not only is it okay, it's encouraged. When evil is eliminated from the world, of course you celebrate. The world is safer. We have less risk. There's no question about it. In fact, there is an actual verse in Proverbs that says, "When evil fall, you must rejoice." It's literally, So people often quote, and to be truly fair, those people come from a good place. I believe that they come from a compassionate place. And truth is, it's not our nature to celebrate death. It's really not. But when we celebrate the elimination of evil, we're not celebrating death. We're celebrating life. Those people are bringing death. We're celebrating life. And so, oftentimes, unfortunately, Jews throughout history are holier than thou. Oh, we've always been that way. And so, I get these messages. Every time I post about a Hamas leader, I always have one or two Jews coming at me and say, "You're acting like them." Right? That's what they say. We're going down to their level. You shouldn't celebrate death. Let me tell you what celebrating death looks like. On October 7th, in the festival, one of the survivors said that he played dead. Just lay there playing dead. And he heard what was going on. And as they were doing the atrocities, they were laughing. That is celebrating death. Us celebrating when a Hamas leader is eliminated, we're not celebrating death, we're celebrating life. It's a very, very, thin line, but it's also a fundamental difference. Does that answer your question?
It does. And also there's a difference between celebrating the elimination of the evil Hamas terrorists and celebrating innocents being killed.
Of course.
So that, I think, is a distinction that gets missed.
Of course.
That, I do recognize a lot of pain here in the necessity of, what's known in war as collateral damage.
Right. So that's a very important point that you just mentioned, right? I think that people like to throw out those numbers and babies and women and journalists, and how many journalists or women and children were killed in Germany when the world denazified Germany? No one asked that question. How come? No one cares. How many women and children were killed in Afghanistan or Iraq? Nobody asked that question. How come? Only when it comes to the Jews they have that question. Innocent people die in war. It's horribly tragic. But war is not something we ever wanted. We've never started a war ever. This war was forced upon us. And it's very sad. And we are going to extraordinary lengths, one might say too far, to minimize civilian death, because we are putting our own children at risk in a very real way. There's no reason, there is no reason, I'll be very clear, there is no reason that an IDF soldier should go on foot into Gaza other than one, to minimize civilian casualty on their side. Otherwise we bomb from the air. So we're putting our own people at risk in order to minimize risk for our enemies, which, again, we can debate, good, not good, whatever, but it comes from a place of morality. And so, if you're going to tell me that whatever amount of thousands of people died that were innocent, first of all, tell me how many people that were innocent died in other wars, and if you can't answer that, then you have a double standard. And more importantly, tell me the source of that information. If you're telling me 25,000 people died in Gaza, fine, I accept it. Just tell me who told you that, because there's no source for such information besides Hamas itself. So if you're a rational, logical, moral person in the Western world, and you're quoting me a terrorist organization, there's something very wrong with you, right? Furthermore, no problem, let's accept it, but just tell me how many terrorists we eliminated too. 0? I don't think I need to tell you how ridiculous that is. So, the world can say what they want, and we are doing what we can to minimize civilian death. But we can't do more than we can do. We need to win this war. Civilians die in war. It's tragic, but that's the reality of war. War we were forced, into.
There's a saying that I hear a lot that if Israel laid down its weapons, Israel...
Hold them there.
Yeah. Can you say something about that? Say what that saying is.
Yeah, she said if the Arabs put down their weapons, they'd have peace. If the Jews put down their weapons, there'd be no Israel. No, I think she said if the Arabs put down their weapon, there'll be no more war. And if the Jews put down their weapons, there'll be no more Israel. It's 100% true. In fact, someone said something similar the other day, and they said, if the Arabs can survive by simply not killing Jews, and the Jews can survive only because they have a defense system, then the Jews are not committing genocide. They're committing genocide on the Jews. All the Arabs have to do is put down their weapons. That's it. You want a state? We've given you a state 50 times. You keep rejecting it. You want a state? Take a state. Stop attacking. Stop with the violence. Stop with the incitement. So if a people, incites and murders and terrorists and terrorizes and rapes and beheads and the other side, the recipient of those horrible atrocities, fights back, who's committing genocide? So this is another example of just a fundamental falsehood that doesn't require rocket science to see, because it's right in front of us in HD footage, and yet the world believes what they believe. So again, I'm torn on every day. It's like, do fight this fight, don't fight this fight. They're not listening, they are listening. It's hard, because the world they've lost all their compass, their moral compass is broken. It's tragic.
What do you think that's about?
It's a good question. But I think the answer is that history repeats itself, and this happens every single time in every empire. Right? The emperor, Colosseum. What are you putting people to fight to their death? It's highly immoral. But that's it. We're defining morality now, right? And again, in every single generation, not in Nazi Germany, what they did from their perspective was the epitome of morality, saving the human race as far as they're concerned, right? And so, we take, hindsight is 2020, we take a look back and we say, how could you think that was moral? And we're going to look back at our Western civilization, and we're going to say, how on earth do we think that was normal? I play this scenario in my head often, of after 120 years, hopefully I meet God, and we start talking, and he says to me, look at the world. Does that make sense to you? It's I look at my world from heaven, I look down, I'm like, wow, we are one messed up species. What on earth? A comedian has a thing about that. He says, God gave us the world. He says, we hope that God's got to be what did you do to your world? What is that? He's like, it's oil. He goes, what do you need oil for? He says, I need to go faster. He's like, what do you have to go faster? He goes, yeah, I have to have a job. He goes, what do you need a job for? He goes, food. He goes, I gave you food. There's fruits and vegetables. Eat them. It's a joke, but the reality is we've taken not only the physical, materialistic world, but the moral world, and we've just 180 degrees to any logic and morality, and it's just how do you believe that? Do you really believe that? It's one thing to have social, cultural challenges. It's another thing to glorify them. It's we've taken things that for thousands, for millions, for billions of years were a deviation from normal society. But things were a certain way for billions of years. And now in Western society, in the last 30 seconds, we've decided that no, morality is different. But is it? And some things are advancements, some things are good. Please don't misunderstand. Women's rights. Women didn't have rights for zillions of years. Now they do. That's fantastic. But I think something that is human nature is we go too far. And we turn immorality into morality. We justify everything because it fits our agenda. And it's really, to me, it's scary. It really is scary because there's no moral direction anymore. It's just anything goes. Anything goes. I heard, this is extreme, not a normal person clearly, but I heard a woman, literally a therapist, professional, say we need to stop calling them pedophiles. We need to call them minor attracted adults. Literally giving a term to justify pedophilia, and I gotta be honest with you, I said, I really believed the world was gonna be, how could the world stand behind pedophiles? There's no way that's gonna happen. They have it on tape, And here we are, the world standing with pedophiles and rapists. How did we get here? Got here because for the past 5 decades in Western civilization, we were told, do not use your brain. Don't tell me that what you see is truth. It's not. I'm going to tell you what's truth. That's it. We were told to stop using critical thinking, and we have, and now we've lost our minds.
Who told us?
Woke culture. My dad says people with such open minds, their brains fell out, right? I could get into this because I have a lot of thoughts on this, but someone said something to me, a rabbi once said something to me that I found so fascinating. There were 2 temples, right? And on Tisha B'Av, one of the saddest days of the Jewish calendar, we commemorate the destruction of those temples. And we talk about the baseless hatred that was amongst the Jewish nation, and that is what led to the destruction of the temple. We hated each other, baseless, for no.
You mean
logic.
Jews hated
Jews,
each other?
yeah. Within the Jewish nation, there was so much hatred that God had the temple destroyed. And every Tisha B'Av, we're like, you got to make sure not to have baseless hatred. We should be good to each other, and blah blah blah. So this rabbi said, only one of the temples was destroyed because of baseless hatred. The other temple was destroyed because of idolatry, murder, and promiscuous, relationships or whatever. In Hebrew, it's called Gilui Arayot, whatever. He says, today, common wisdom says that, we need to make sure not to have baseless hatred because that's what we're guilty of. There's so much hatred and divide in the Jewish people. We need to, fix that, which is what caused. And this rabbi said, no. We're not guilty of baseless hatred today. Yes, there's a lot of hatred in the Jewish people, but it's not baseless. There's political, whatever. It's not good. It's not good. It's not ideal, but it's not baseless. He says, today, we're actually doing what the second temple was destroyed for. He says, we've taken all the isms, right? Liberalism, feminism, wokeism, whatever ism you want to say, which some of them are legit, good things. Feminism's a great thing, but we've turned it into a religion. And it's become the modern day idolatry. Not only is no one addressing them, but you can't even talk about them without being canceled. It's a very scary world out there. People, I'm the recipient of it many, many, many times. People have tried endless times to cancel me. Endless. From, Muslims on X to people who are jealous and, people are, unfortunately, there's a lot of very small people, But again, I'm going to keep saying it. Our job, and I say our, I mean the logical, rational people in the Western world, need to fight very hard to not let it seep in. It's not easy because you're surrounded by it. And it is our moral responsibility to maintain our moral clarity, because if we don't, we're the last frontier. And if we lose, then that's it. There's no morality.
Yeah, but when you call it murder, like we've called cancel culture social murder. Right? And people are afraid of that. And because they're afraid of that, they don't speak up for things they know to be true and right and morally good.
Right.
Why do you have the courage to do that? Why are you doing that
question.
instead of working on your tech business, which I'm sure is lucrative and fun?
That's a great question. It is a great question. Not only am I doing this and not working my tech business, but I'm on no one's payroll. So I have no income. Literally, I'm like, this is what I need to be doing right now. God's been good and he's had people support me and it's okay, but I don't feel like I have a choice. To give an analogy from my old world, the tech world, if you're an entrepreneur, you don't have a choice. You can't work a 9 to 5. You have entrepreneurship in your veins. It's in your DNA. You have to build. Any entrepreneur will tell you they could not sit at 9 to 5 because they are an entrepreneur in their blood. I can't not do this. This is who I am. This is what I believe. This is the way I was raised. I don't view myself as a hero. I'm speaking truth. The fact that they're not speaking truth, they're insane. I'm not anything extraordinary. I'm just speaking the truth. And I don't feel like I have a choice. In a very real way. I feel like everything I've done till now has brought me to this moment, this stage that I built, and I feel like I'm channeling my late brother. I don't have a choice. I need to be doing this. And in a very real way, it's impacting millions of lives. Like, I'm getting messages from people in every continent saying to me, you literally changed my mind. Or I lit Shabbat candles because of you for the first time. Or what did someone say to me? They celebrated Shabbat in their house for the first time. This one, I never said a word to this one. Never. She just sees my posts, and I talk a lot about Judaism. I own my Judaism, and it inspires people. People are hungry for light. They really are. We don't realize this, but it's a very dark world, and that darkness manifests somewhere very specific in our social media feeds. And so people are hungry for light. They are. Some people don't realize they are, but everyone's hungry for light. If we could be that source of light for them, we win.
Yeah.
We just have to know how to communicate that source of light.
Can we talk about your brother?
Sure.
Tell me about your brother.
So I'm one of 5 boys. Ari was one above me. So we grew up together, basically. And he was a very passionate human being about everything that he was passionate about. He was very passionate about. So he came to Israel by himself, just picked up and came here. Volunteered for the army, climbed the ranks in the army, volunteered for reserve duty, climbed the ranks of reserve duty. He got his exemption papers, he ripped them up, and he continued to volunteer. He was a 4th-degree black belt. He was a big dude. He was online 24 hours a day defending Israel, but literally, like all day, every day.
When you say online, what do you mean?
On social media, just fighting with anti-Semites and just being Israel's biggest advocate. He was a very outspoken Israel advocate. And, his wife, 4 kids lives outside of Jerusalem in Efrat. And he was shopping for his family the day before Yom Kippur. And a 16-year-old Palestinian kid came from behind and stabbed him in the main artery. And he was dead immediately, basically, no blood in his veins. But somehow, miraculously, and I mean that in a very literal sense, he was able to chase down the terrorist, jump over a wall with no blood in his veins, and shoot the terrorist. But the terrorist was inches away from his next victim, a woman named Hillel, who has a falafel stand, and she just gave the terrorist a falafel 5 minutes before, not knowing he's a terrorist, obviously. And she was his next victim, and he was running after her with a knife, and Ari shot him and saved her life. And so she has become a part of the family since, obviously. But he got an award from the state of Israel as a national hero, because in his last breath, he saved someone's life. And he was very outspoken on the internet. He had many followers. But the truth about him only came out after he was gone, and that is that he impacted millions of lives, literally millions of lives, from his phone, impacted millions of lives everywhere around the world. I mean, I get messages from people you wouldn't even believe. And a woman wrote me, I kid you not, a woman wrote me from African village. He'd never heard of this. I mean, she says to me, literally, she writes to me, she says, "Get me out of here." I'm like, what happened? What? She says, "Your brother promised me to get me out of here." It's like, I don't know what went on in that conversation, but this woman in Africa, he obviously impacted her. And so, the stories don't stop, right? I mean, it's been 5 years and the stories don't stop. People say to me, "I moved to Israel because of your brother. I'm religious because of your brother. I converted because of your brother," literally. And so, he left many legacies, but I would say the biggest legacy is that every person has the ability to impact millions of lives. Every person, especially if you have a keyboard, has the ability to change the world in a very real way, not in a Tony Robbins kind of way, but in a real way. Not like I'm being an inspiring, motivational speaker. No, you have the ability to change the world. You do. And he capitalized on that ability in a very real way. He lived and breathed the Jewish people, the Jewish state, and the Jewish Torah. That was his life. So, it's a horrible tragedy on a personal level. But, he has since become, his name was Ari. Ari means lion. So he's become the Lion of Zion. Like, that's his thing. It's his brand. Someone made a logo and whatever. And he has thousands of videos on the internet. People still watch them, whatever. But he made a difference in this world. 46 years, he made a difference in this world. And again, it's one of the lessons among many others that I take away, which is, someone made a joke one time. If you think that you're only one person and you can't really make a difference, try going to sleep in a room with a mosquito. It's like, you tiny little thing, you can't sleep, right? Every person has, if you capitalize on those abilities. Many people don't. They think, I'm in my echo chamber, I'm not going to bother. That's just not true. It's not true. So that's what he taught me. But yeah, it was a horrible, horrible day that Sunday morning.
What year was that?
5 years ago. So we're in 2023. It was
2024 now.
Right, so it's probably 2018, I think. It was 2018. His wife is just a hero of unprecedented. She's basically become an activist for Israel, raising kids, and he left a big legacy, My parents, came here as just hardcore Zionists and gave up on their cushy life in America, and never in a million years did they think they'd lose a son to terror. So they're, obviously, but they're also heroes. They're unbelievable, my parents. So, again, we were dragged into a club we never wanted to be a part of. But
and you stepped into his legacy.
Right. I mean, I didn't before the war, but now I did, yeah. And I'm not prepared to make any announcements or declarations, but I don't see myself going back to tech. People say to me, like, are you going to go back to tech? And I'm like, maybe, maybe not, but I don't see myself going back to tech. I just, in terms of meaning, and I just feel like what I'm doing right now is very much what I need to be doing, And I think I'm not saying, listen, I'm being honest with you. I had this conversation with one of my employees the other day. A couple of weeks ago, we read the portion of Joseph and how his brother sold him into slavery, and he went to Egypt, and he solved dreams, and he became a dream solver, blah, 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 whatever. And we know about Joseph as a kid. He had a big ego, right? His dreams about everyone bowing down to him, and the commentaries say he used to play with his hair all the time. He was an egomaniac. And then when he got to Egypt and he solved these dreams, Pharaoh was like, wow, Joseph, you're amazing. And Joseph answered him, he said, Biladai, it's not me. God's giving me this ability. I'm not, and I got out in a very real way, what's happening with me on the internet today is miraculous. I don't know where these ideas that I have come from. I said to my employee yesterday, I send him content and he either designs or whatever. I said, that this stuff that I send you just lands in my brain. Like, I don't know where they come from. God is just giving me content every day. For 5 years, I've been writing Torah, thoughts on the Torah for the weekly portion with a lesson for leadership. I've done 4+ rounds of the Torah. Every week, every Friday for the past 5 years. All of it just landed in my head. It's really crazy. So, and I'm not trying to be like, fake modest. Like, it really is not me. God just plants these things in my brain. And so, I'm producing a ridiculous amount of content in this war.
So, that from a certain perspective sounds like fake modesty, but from another perspective, it sounds very grandiose. Like I have a direct line to God.
No, I don't mean it like that. I just mean like, where's this stuff coming from?
Yeah.
Where are these ideas coming from? Like I have these ideas of like, I don't know, a list of, what I do the other day, a list of things that would only be, a list of things that would be controversial in a normal world, but would be not controversial in a normal world, but today are like, put the anti-Israel crowd into cardiac arrest. It's like, babies should not be kidnapped. It's like, how could you say that? Like, in what world is that an immoral thing to say? All women should be believed. Rape. All women should be believed, right? That was the, the slogan 30 seconds ago. All of a sudden it's Jews being raped, not all women, right? So like the list is long. It was a list of probably 40 things that I said that are today controversial, but in a normal moral world would not be controversial, So, I don't know how to explain it to you. It's absolutely, I didn't mean it in a grandiose kind of way at all. I just meant like these ideas that pop into my head on a daily basis. I don't know where they come from. They just land in my head. I'm like, boom, I have an idea. I just start writing it, and if I don't write it down, I'll forget it, It's just like, just all day,
Is there a Jewish concept of like people on earth being able to connect with people who've passed away?
Like a seance? What's it called?
No, not like a seance,
Seance.
but like, could your brother be giving you messages or?
I mean, disclaimer, I don't know. I'm not an expert on this. That because there's different kind of layers of Judaism, and that's like the secret layer, right? I'm not an expert by any means. I don't know the answer to your question, but I do believe that there's such a concept. I do believe, we know that, we give God throughout the Torah endless times. We give God human attributes. Hashem got angry. It talks about af as a nose. God doesn't have a nose, right? Many, many instances of that. And so there is some sort of human experience up there. I don't know. Again, I don't know how it manifests, but I feel like I'm channeling him on a daily basis, 100%. Where that concept comes from in Judaism, I don't know.
So if Ari were here, if I were interviewing him, what do you think he would say about what's happening now?
He'd probably be a lot less polished. He could be a lot less politically correct.
Yeah, less.
Yeah, I think he'd probably say we need to flatten Gaza.
Oof.
That's probably what he would say. And again, we're not going to get into it, but the question of whether we should be sending in our children is a real question. It's a question. I don't know any other war that a country sent in aid to an enemy state. That doesn't exist in history. So again, I'm not saying God forbid to kill innocent people. I don't think Ari wouldn't have said to kill innocent people, but he would have said our lives and our children's lives are more important than the lives of someone who attacked us on October 7th and massacred our kids. I'm sorry that this is happening to you, but you brought this on yourself. And yes, we'll do everything we can within our power to minimize civilian death, but we won't put our own kids in danger to minimize their risk. That's just not how war works. So he'd probably be a little more militant than me. And again, I'm not saying I disagree with it. I would never say the words flatten Gaza, neither would he have, by the way. He wouldn't have said it that way. But he would have been very upset at the IDF and the government for doing what we're doing right now. I think we would have, people, this is something I think about all the time. It's like the world's saying we're doing what they say we're doing, genocide, all that, ethnic cleansing, and yet we're putting our kids in danger. So a part of me is like, you know what? We have the Air Force. Yes, we should use precision to not kill innocent people. And if we see a kid walking by a terrorist, then don't open fire for sure. But we should be using the Air Force more and less on foot. And yes, there's the question of the hostages, and it's not as simple. I'm oversimplifying, but the line between morality and immorality is pretty thin. And sending in people, kids, putting them in harm's way, is that moral to do because you want to save your enemy? I don't know. I wouldn't want to be in Netanyahu's shoes right now. It's really rough. You have the hostages' families saying that that's the top priority. And, not to get, listen, I can't pretend to understand what's going through a person like that. I can't even imagine the pressure he's under, but from where I'm sitting, the state of Israel has defined two objectives to this war that are mutually exclusive. You can't do both. Either you get your hostages back by negotiating with Hamas, or you destroy Hamas and you kill the hostages. You can't do both. You just can't. If you're destroying Hamas, they will kill your hostages. They will. And if you're getting your hostages back, it means you have to negotiate with Hamas. So the objectives of destroy Hamas and get the hostages back are mutually exclusive, which is typical Israel.
Yeah.
It's like, let's just throw out objectives. Think about what you're saying. It doesn't make any sense, So yeah, there's obviously a lot of anger and disappointment in the government and everything. And that's the discussion that's going to be had the day after. And it's a very important discussion. We still don't know how this all happened. But for now, the Jewish people are united like never before. The last time we were this united was at Mount Sinai. Literally. At Mount Sinai, we know that 600,000 men stood there and received the Torah. And the Torah says they stood there, ish echad belev echad. It says, the actual verse in the Torah, not in the commentary, it says, Vayichan sham Yisrael neged ahar. They parked. The Jews parked at the bottom of the mountain. But it uses the word park, it uses in singular. Should have said vayachnu, they all parked. 600,000 men. Why Vayichan? Why is it one singular? So the commentaries say they were like one heart, one man with one heart. They were completely unified. That's what the commentaries say. 600,000 men unified. Well, if you think about it, 300,000 people were recruited to reserves in Israel, and 300,000 Jews marched in Washington. That's 600,000 Jews unified. It's Mount Sinai again. Real unity. We've never seen unity like this. Real unity. We have a job to maintain that unity, and it's horribly tragic that we needed Hamas to do what they did in order to gain that, unity. But the worst thing that can happen is that we lose that unity when the war ends. We need to make sure there was a lot of hatred before. The judicial reform, there was a lot of hatred. There was no pluralism, there was no acceptance, there was just you're wrong and I'm right, both sides. And that must not repeat itself. We cannot get back to where we were. And by the way, to be very clear, not only would I never, ever, ever, God forbid, say that somebody deserved for something to happen, that's the most horrible thing. And when rabbis say that the Holocaust happened, I'm like, you're ridiculous. You don't know how God works, and stop pretending that you do. But I'm trying to think how to say this diplomatically. If I was God, I think about this all the time. If I was God, and I look down at my creation, the earth, the world, and I see my children not letting each other pray on Yom Kippur on the streets, and just horrible, horrible hatred, I'd be pretty upset. What are you guys doing? I gave you everything. Well, just get along. I'd be pretty upset. And, the analogy that I tell myself, which is a very childish, oversimplistic analogy, but I believe it to be the real truth, is that when I bring my kid, my infant, to the doctor to get a shot, he looks at me and says, Dad, what are you doing? You're stabbing me with a needle. What kind of father stabs his kid with a needle? Now, we as adults understand that he needs that shot. But to him, you could try to explain to him until you're blue in the face that he needs that shot. From his perspective, you are a horrible father or a horrible mother. I don't know why we needed this shot. I don't know. But I know that God is good. I know that God loves us, and I know that God does what's best. How can I possibly say that October 7th is what's best? I can't, because it's a shot. I don't get it at all. My father let this happen to me. It seems horrible, immoral. How could you do this to me? But we're infants who don't get it, because we don't have the ability to get it. It's beyond our finite, mental abilities to understand God, which is infinite, And so I tell myself all the time, I don't know why this had to happen, but somehow one day we will understand why it happened. Not to say, and again, I'm going to be very clear, not to say that the Holocaust happened so that we could have the state of Israel. God forbid, I would never say that. But the state of Israel happened because of the Holocaust. Not to say the Holocaust was justified or good or anything like that. But, I don't know if we'd have the state of Israel without it.
Well, it was conceived of even through, international agreements before the Holocaust.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like
the 1917 Balfour Declaration.
Oh, right, yeah. But it wasn't a practical political movement until, right? Anyway, my point is, I'm not, God forbid, connecting the two things. I'm just saying that I believe, this is my belief system, my faith, that God is good. And it's very hard for us to see beyond our tiny little cubicle, which is, we're just a little, what do we know? We can't understand these things. It hurts. When we lose someone, it hurts. But I can only repeat what someone said to me. I have a very bad memory, but I remember this vividly. I don't know why. A friend of mine's uncle died in one of the wars. And he, every year on the day that he died, the family would go to the cemetery and whatever. So I went with them one time. He was a really close friend of mine, and the mother gave a speech. And she said, God wants the righteous ones by his side. It's not a coincidence that every time we lose someone, somehow this person was an angel, right? So, I think when we lose these soldiers, it's unbearable pain, unbearable. But I have to tell myself that there's a reason this happened. I have to, just for my own sanity. I'm not preaching to anyone else. Anyone can believe whatever they want. For me and my sanity, I have to believe there's a bigger plan here. And again, it's not like God's, the famous thing where the guy gets on the roof. There's a flood, and that's God's like, I sent you Iron Dome.
Tell the story.
Yeah, there's a big flood. A guy gets on the roof, and everyone's getting on boats, and he's getting on the roof. He's like, okay, God will save me. And so a boat comes along and says, dude, get on the boat. He's like, God's gonna save me. Send a helicopter. He says, get in the helicopter. He says, God's gonna save me. And the water goes up and up and up, and he drowns. He goes up to God. He says, God, what? He says, I believed in you. I have faith in you. How did you let me die? And he said, what do you mean let you die? I sent you a boat. I sent you a helicopter. Why didn't you get on? Right? So God's like, I have sent you the Iron Dome. I've sent you 20,000 rockets falling in empty spaces. I have sent you these crazy terrorists who couldn't even do what they planned to do because of their savage. I sent you these things. Open your eyes. We just don't see it. We don't see it. It's hard. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way. How do you see it when you're so deep in the sorrow and the devastation of what happened? You can't see it. But we have to. We have to take a step back. We have to look at our history.
You're making me actually think of the golden calf.
100%.
The people who had seen
100%.
the pillar of smoke and had followed.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. It really is unbelievable to think about. After everything God did for them. 10 plagues, everything. 10 seconds, they don't have Moses, they bow down to a golden calf. How is that possible? Because that's our nature. I love my nation, but we're a really dumb nation. We just same mistakes over and over. It doesn't make any sense. None of it makes any sense. And this war makes no sense from beginning to end. And this week's portion, God, hardens Pharaoh's heart, right? Why he did that, it's a whole discussion. Free choice, not free choice, but that is how I understand the world right now. There is no way that logical, intellectual people believe the things that they believe about Israel. God has hardened their hearts to hate. Why? Maybe it's to reveal himself like he did in Egypt. I don't know. But there's no other way to explain it. You cannot explain what's going on right now through a human rational lens. You just can't. You'll lose your mind. None of this makes any sense.
I think it's to unify Jews.
Maybe. I don't know. I have no way to know. I don't know God's ways. That's something that clearly has happened. God could have unified Jews in another way. Didn't have to experience that horrible whatever. But I don't know the answer. I just know, or I believe that God is good and He wants what's best for us. And you know what? We have verses in the Bible that Imo anochi b'tzara, I am with you. God says with the Jewish people, when you're in sorrow and pain, I am there with you. And I believe God is feeling the pain just like we're feeling the pain. He's here with us. I don't know why He's not getting rid of the pain. I don't know. I ask Him every morning. Every morning I pray and I say, what are you doing? We've unified. We're giving tzedakah, charity. We're praying. People have never prayed before in their lives. What do you want from us? Like, what are you waiting for? It's time, I don't know. I don't know what He's waiting for. But hopefully it will happen soon.
Thank you very much.
We will dance again.
We will dance again.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.